3 weeks before the eruption, the scientists raised the alert level. 3 weeks. That is the gap I want you to hold in your head for the next 15 minutes, because the entire story of what happened on Whakaari on December 9th, 2019 lives inside that gap. On November 18th, 2019, GNS Science, New Zealand's official volcano monitoring agency, moved the volcanic alert level on Whakaari from 1 to 2. Level 2 means moderate to heightened volcanic unrest, increased likelihood of eruption. 21 days later, 47 people walked onto that volcano on a guided tour. 22 of them did not walk off. Hi, I'm Nate from The Final Trip, and today I want to do something a little different. I am not going to tell you about a tourist who ignored a warning. I'm going to tell you about a young couple from Richmond, Virginia, who trusted a system, who booked a Royal Caribbean cruise for their honeymoon, who paid $8,000 for the most popular shore excursion on the itinerary, who were handed a brochure that told them to bring a hat, sunglasses, and walking shoes, and who learned at 2:11 p.m. local time on December 9th, 2019, that the system they trusted had been failing for 3 weeks, while no one whose job it was to say stop selling this excursion was willing to be the one who said it. This is the story of Matt and Lauren Urey. They are real people. They survived. They have spoken on the record in the Netflix documentary The Volcano: Rescue from Whakaari, in NBC and WTVR interviews, in court records, and in their own words. They are why this video can be told honestly with their names without a single line of fictionalization. But the story is not really about them. The story is about the supply chain that put them on that island. Stay with me. Matt Urey was 36 years old. Lauren Urey was 32. They lived in Richmond, Virginia. They had met on Match.com. They got married on October 18th, 2019, less than 8 weeks before the eruption. The honeymoon was a Royal Caribbean cruise on the Ovation of the Seas, a 4,180 passenger ship that, on the morning of December 9th, was docked at the port of Tauranga on the North Island of New Zealand. The Ureys had booked one of the ship's top-selling shore excursions, a guided tour of an active volcano called Whakaari, also known by its English name White Island, operated by a company called White Island Tours. The brochure they were handed advised them to bring 3 things: a hat, sunglasses, walking shoes. That was the entire equipment list. I want you to sit with that detail because it is the smoking gun. Whakaari is and was, 3 weeks before the Ureys arrived, an active stratovolcano sitting 48 kilometers offshore in the Bay of Plenty. It had been continuously monitored by GNS Science, the New Zealand government's geological monitoring agency, for over 40 years. It had erupted in 2016. The 2016 eruption happened at night. No tourists were present. Everyone who studied the volcano understood that the only reason no one had died in 2016 was timing. By October 2019, GNS Science was tracking sustained increases in seismic tremor and sulfur dioxide emissions. By November 18th, the date that matters, those readings had reached their highest level since the 2016 eruption. GNS issued a public bulletin: Volcanic Alert Level 2, Moderate to Heightened Unrest, Increased Likelihood of Eruption. Tour operators received this bulletin. Royal Caribbean's local liaison received it. Whakaari Management Limited, the private company owned by the Buttle family that licensed the island for commercial tourism, received it. White Island Tours, the operator that ran the boat excursions, received it. Tours kept running. The brochure did not change: hat, sunglasses, walking shoes. And on the morning of December 9th, 2019, Matt and Lauren Urey put on hats, sunglasses, and walking shoes, and boarded a tender boat to a volcano whose alert level had been elevated for 3 weeks. Lauren wore long sleeves and leggings that day. She runs cold. She had told Matt in the cabin that morning that the brochure said to expect warm weather, but she always brought layers because she always got cold on boats. Matt wore shorts and a t-shirt. I want you to remember those two clothing choices because they are about to determine which of these two newlyweds suffered burns to 23% of her body and which one suffered burns to 53% of his. The boat docked at the Whakaari jetty at approximately 11:40 a.m. The tour group, 38 passengers from the Ovation of the Seas, plus 9 staff from White Island Tours and a handful of independent travelers disembarked, were issued hard hats and gas masks and began the walk toward the crater. The terrain on Whakaari is what volcanologists call a Martian landscape. Yellow sulfur deposits streaked across gray ash, a steaming acidic crater lake at the center, fumaroles hissing constantly through cracks in the rock. Most passengers later described the smell, sulfur so dense it coated the back of the throat, as the most visceral memory of the morning. The tour group reached the crater rim at approximately 12:30 p.m. Their lead guide was a 30-year-old man named Marshall-Inman. Hayden had grown up in Whakatane, the small coastal town that served as the operational base for most Whakaari tours. He had been guiding on the Volcano for years. He was, by every account from the surviving passengers and his colleagues, exactly the kind of guide tourists hope they get: knowledgeable, calm, careful with the people in his charge. Hayden Marshall-Inman did not survive December 9, 2019. His body has never been formally recovered. At 2:11 p.m., Whakaari erupted. The eruption was what volcanologists call a phreatic explosion. Superheated water trapped beneath the crater floor flashed to steam in a fraction of a second and blew the cap off the vent. The ash plume reached 3.7 kilometers in altitude within 60 seconds. A pyroclastic surge, a ground-hugging cloud of ash, rock, and steam at temperatures above 300 degrees Celsius, swept across the small island at speeds over 100 kilometers per hour. Outside air temperature that day was approximately 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The steam that hit the tourists was hot enough to cause third-degree burns through clothing, sear airways shut with a single inhaled breath, and melt synthetic fabrics directly onto skin. 47 people were on the island. 22 died. 25 suffered burns, most of them over more than 90% of their bodies. Matt Urey, with third-degree burns covering approximately 53% of his body, initial reports said 80%, was still walking when the rescue boats arrived. He helped Lauren toward the jetty. Lauren, whose long sleeves and leggings had absorbed and partially deflected the steam from the parts of her body they covered, suffered burns to approximately 23%. The clothing Matt had not worn, because the brochure said hat, sunglasses, walking shoes, and the morning was warm, was the difference. Before Royal Caribbean called Matt's family, before the cruise line's emergency protocols had even activated, Matt Urey left a voicemail for his mother. He had third-degree burns over half his body. He left her a voicemail. That detail is in the public record. It is in the Netflix documentary. It is the most cinematic, verifiable fact in the entire incident, and I am telling it to you the way Matt himself has told it because he is alive to tell it. He spent over a month in a coma after that voicemail. He and Lauren both endured months of surgeries, skin grafts, and rehabilitation. They are still married. They have spoken publicly. They are why I can tell you their names. Now, the Accountability Act. I want to give this its proper weight because this is the part of the Whakaari story that almost never gets told on YouTube, and it is the part that matters most. WorkSafe New Zealand launched what would become the largest health and safety investigation in the country's history. Approximately 15.8 million New Zealand dollars. 13 parties charged. The trial took place in Auckland District Court across 2022 and 2023. 6 parties pleaded guilty or were found guilty. 6 had charges dismissed. The guilty pleas. Listen to this list. White Island Tours Limited, the operator that ran the Urey's excursion, pleaded guilty. Volcanic Air Safaris, a helicopter operator that ran tours to the volcano, pleaded guilty. Arius, another aerial operator, pleaded guilty. Kahu NZ, a helicopter operator, pleaded guilty. In-Flight Charters pleaded guilty. and was fined $227,500 New Zealand dollars. And this is the one that should stop you in your tracks, GNS Science. The New Zealand government agency, whose entire job was monitoring the volcano and warning the public, pleaded guilty to safety failings of its own. The agency that raised the alert level on November 18th. The agency whose data should have stopped the tours. That agency admitted in court that it had failed in its duties to protect the people who relied on its monitoring. A volcanologist who testified at trial, and this is from the public RNZ trial coverage, stated that the visitor numbers Whakaari was processing each day created a greater chance of a mass casualty event. In other words, this was statistically going to happen. There is one more piece of the accountability story I have to get exactly right, because it has been widely misreported. Whakaari Management Limited, the company owned by the Buttle family that licensed the island for tourism, was initially convicted at trial and ordered to pay reparations of 4.88 million New Zealand dollars and a fine of 1.045 million. That conviction was overturned by the New Zealand High Court in February 2025 in a case called Whakaari Management Limited v. WorkSafe NZ 2025 NZHC 288. The High Court ruled on a legal question about the duties a private landowner owes to commercial activities operating on their property. I am not telling you the landowners were convicted. I am telling you the tour operators pleaded guilty. The company that ran the tours admitted in open court that it had failed to keep its customers safe. The agency that monitored the volcano admitted the same thing. Those facts are not in dispute. So here is the question I want to leave you with. Royal Caribbean sold the excursion. White Island Tours operated the excursion. Whakaari Management licensed the island. GNS Science monitored the volcano and pleaded guilty to safety failings. The brochure said, hat, sunglasses, walking shoes. Whose job was it to say no? Whose job was it on November 18th, 2019, when the alert level went from 1 to 2 to pick up the phone and tell Royal Caribbean to stop selling the Whakaari excursion? Whose job was it on December 8th, the night before the eruption, to look at the GNS data and decide that tomorrow's tours should not run? Each link in the chain assumed someone else was accountable. The cruise line assumed the operator was checking. The operator assumed the monitoring agency would issue a stronger warning. The monitoring agency assumed the operators would act on the warning they had issued. The landowner assumed they were not responsible for what their licensees did with the property. The Ureys did not assume anything. They booked an excursion advertised on a cruise ship. They believed, as we all believe, that the tour would not be running if it were not safe. 22 people died because that belief was wrong. Matt and Lauren Urey survived. They are alive. They are still married. They have spent 6 years rebuilding bodies that were burned almost beyond recovery. And every time someone asks them what they wish had been different, they answer the same way. They wish someone in that supply chain had decided 3 weeks earlier that the answer was no. Nobody did. I make this channel because I think the question of who is supposed to say no is the most important question in adventure tourism. Sometimes the answer is the tourist who ignored the warning. Sometimes, like this, the answer is everyone and no one, and a brochure that said hat, sunglasses, walking shoes. 3 weeks before the eruption, the scientists raised the alert level. The tours kept running. That is not an act of God. That is a choice made by people, and the people who made it are named in the court records, and some of them have admitted what they did, and some of them have not, and 22 human beings are dead because of it. Matt and Lauren Urey are not. Remember their names, remember Hayden Marshall-Inman's name, and remember the question, whose job was it to say no? Thanks for watching The Final Trip. If this one stayed with you, hit subscribe. There are always more.